Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, it was Halloween night. Because of course there's no other night it could be than Halloween, because that is when monsters struck inside a home. There had been 4 people inside this home, and while the ghouls and the goblins were knocking on their door to no answer, they could never have imagined in their wildest dreams the house of horrors that lay just on the other side.
Obviously, you gotta know finding dead people doesn't really leave you in the right state of mind. Can do things to you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then everything that ensued.
This was a case that started all the way back in 2015, and it twists and turns for, well, for quite a long time, until right now, actually, if you can believe that, so buckle yourself up. Before we get into it, please subscribe to see new stories for the dark every single week. Now, let's give it a go. So this all begins in the small town of Pendleton, South Carolina. A pretty enough place, very small, only a few thousand folk living right in there. It is an old town. In fact, it is on the National Register of Historic Places, so look at you, Pendleton, way to go. But of course, you know, being an old town, it's probably got a dark history. There's enough time there to have a lot of skeletons and secrets galore. Pendleton lies close to Clemson and not really close to a whole lot else really. It's mostly home for families who work in the surrounding areas. The town of Pendleton, it sits in Anderson County, South Carolina, and there's actually a surprising number of murders and cold cases coming right from there and not even touching the main topic of today's video. For example, in November 2012, a barrel was found in a lake in Anderson County. Inside that barrel was a body. That was the body of 37-year-old Andrea Mitchell. The very next day, they found another barrel with another body inside.
The Anderson County Sheriff's Office says the first barrel was found yesterday after receiving a tip from a passerby. It contained the body of a woman. Today she was identified, but her name is not being released. The other barrel was found around 3 o'clock this afternoon. As authorities work to determine the identification of this person, the Sheriff's Office is continuing to search Lake Hartwell for clues.
These cases would eventually be traced back to a John Michael Young, who murdered both of these people a month apart, subsequently dumping their bodies in barrels in Lake Hartwell. Their murderers were tracked down to a garage filled with chainsaws, knives, saws. Yeah. And as I said, if you look in the Anderson area Crime Stoppers, there's a startling number of cold cases, unsolved murders from this area. All of these people victims of unsolved homicides. The story I'm going to tell you would have been on that list for 8 long years. So, right in the autumn of 2015, skeletons weren't only just in the closet of the Anderson County, Pendleton area. The skeletons were walking down the streets, if you can believe that. It was Halloween night. Kids were going door to door, you know, knocking on them doors, giving out tricks in return for treats. Firecrackers and fireworks were lighting up the night sky. All you could hear was crack, 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 which is probably why nobody ever noticed another type of crack, crack, crack coming from a house on Refuge Road. After that then was silence. It was on November 2nd, 2015 that a 30-year-old woman named Amy was walking across the lawn towards that particular house. She had just been chilling over the weekend with her brand new shampoo husband. She had 2 kids from a previous relationship, but they had been away for the weekend. She had a boy and a girl, Savannah and Brady, and her husband's name was Ross. Or, well, his actual name was Ross Moore, because, you know, just when you don't have enough Ross, when you just needed a little bit more, well, as you would, he went by Ross. Ross Vilardi and Amy Vilardi. Now, Amy, Ross, and the kids, they lived on the same property. There was 2 trailers. There was the main trailer, referred to as a double wide, in the front, and that's where her parents lived, and then at the back, about 50 yards across the back lawn, was a single wide where Amy, Ross Vilardi, and their kids lived. In the main house lived Cathy and Mike Scott. That was Amy's mother and her stepfather. And along with Cathy and Mike lived one of each of their mothers, Violet Taylor, Cathy's mom, and Barbara Scott, Mike's mom. So there was like 4 generations of the family living on this one property. The house was located at 2217 Refuge Road, a 6-minute drive from downtown Big P. But there were plenty of neighbours around, it wasn't terribly remote. There was the primary house where the 4 older folk lived in the front, then the Vilardis and Amy's 2 young'uns in the back. So Amy is walking across the lawn that morning, hands in her pockets, whistling away, gonna go see her folks and both her grandmothers. Now, she hadn't seen them in a couple of days, but she thought they'd be home. Their car was out front, and Amy was a dog lover. She was all about it. So she hadn't seen the dogs out either for a while, so just want to go check and maybe let them out, making sure they're, doing their business, going for walks, all of that. That blustery autumn day, she walked over to the door, she turned the key, opened it up, and inside was complete silence. As I said, there was 4 people who lived here. She assumed they would be home as their cars were out front, but it was just completely dead inside. And it was completely dead inside. It was a small home, but each step was as heavy as an anvil as she walked into the main living room from the back patio, and what she saw, she just stopped immediately and saw pure carnage inside this double-wide trailer. She ran back to the trailer where she lived, telling Mike, just stay inside, keep the kids inside, don't let them, near the windows, and she dialed 911.
I need somebody out here. What's going on? Oh, God. Man, I can't. There's 4 people in my mama's house, and they're dead. Who are these people that are in the house? It's my mom, my grandma, and my Jenny, and my stepdad.
All 4 people who lived there, Cathy and Mike Scott, and then Barbara and Violet, were dead. Brutally murdered. Police arrived swiftly, though this was well into the more rural part on Refuge Road. This was not a place for violent crime at all. I mean, there was a couple of unsolved murders in Anderson County, but, well, I don't know really any places that would be familiar with a quadruple homicide. They had never seen a scene like this before, and I don't think they would ever want to see it again after. In fact, I think most people could agree on that. The police, slowly going through this bloodbath in the home, found in the living room 3 bodies. Mike's mother Barbara, and his mother-in-law Violet. Then in the bedroom lay Violet's daughter, Cathy. All had been shot and stabbed repeatedly. Whoever had done this was not afraid of violence at all and was vengeful. It was a very gruesome scene. It was a house of horrors, to the T.
Now, it all started here about 12:30 this afternoon. That's when deputies from Anderson County got a call about a possible shooting. When investigators went into the home, they found the victim. Discovery was made today by Cathy Scott's daughter. Now, deputies tell me at this point they don't know how or why this happened, only that they have a lot of investigating to do. Now, we are continuing to follow this story, and we have team coverage out here on the scene as family members and friends and neighbors are gathering, trying to come to grips with this tragedy.
So it was first thought that this horrific scene occurred on Halloween night because Mike had answered a phone call at around 9:30 p.m. from his sister. They'd been talking about college football and the Clemson game they had just watched. But then a following call the very next morning was unanswered, so murders must have occurred sometime on Halloween night. And their first thought was, well, you got 3 victims in the living room, and 1 victim kind of separate from everybody else. Was this like a murder-suicide or something like that? Had Cathy somehow lost her mind, murdered the 3 others? Her mother, her husband, and her mother-in-law, and then that's why she was separate. She then walked away into the room and ended her own life. But no gun was found. No gun was found with Cathy, so that would lead you to believe then, well, where would it be? The forensics then, who swiftly came in, they were given a lash. They then actually uncovered something pretty interesting and also even more horrifying. Although all 4 victims had been shot repeatedly and stabbed repeatedly, it wasn't the gunshot that killed any of them. The 3 victims in the living room, they had all been shot post-mortem. They had all been shot twice in the head, but it had been the knives that had ended their lives. Cathy had been shot before she died, they could tell by like the blood and stuff like that, but the shot wasn't what killed her. It was actually a stab wound in the chest that killed her. So shooting 3 people twice in the head after they're dead, that's I mean, that's overkill of overkill. And all 4 had their throats, quote, filleted all the way open. This is hell. We talk a lot about true crime and murder scenes on that chapter, and I genuinely think after looking at the pictures of this one, it might be one of the worst ones I've ever seen. Now, the victims, right? You got Violet and you got Barbara, right? These lovely old grandmothers, 82 and 80 respectively. Who would want to hurt them? I mean, unless they were those type of like mean old ladies, but I don't think they were, and they were never described as that. They were described as these really like your stereotypical grandmother. Soft-spoken, kind of quiet, very, very sweet, would get startled at anything. You come behind her, you put your hand on her shoulder, they'll jump out of her skin. They were both found on the floor wearing their pajamas, again, lending credence to the time of the attack. Mike, 58, he worked for the Department of Transportation. Cathy, 60, a homemaker. Mike and Cathy had been junior high school sweethearts in Pendleton. Then they broke up, as most teenage relationships do. They found each other again years later, and both were now caring for their elderly mothers. First, Violet, Cathy's mom, had moved in due to health issues, and then Mike's mom, Barbara, had moved in due to health issues, so Mike, he worked during the days while his wife took care of the older ladies. And with all of the scene less than 50 yards away, you have Amy, Ross, and 2 young children.
Investigators say the victims didn't have time to fight back against the person who killed them. 7 News reporter Tony Cedrone talked with relatives tonight.
I keep feeling like I should be waking up from a dream right now, and it's just not happening. So yeah, it's like a movie or something. It's not supposed to be real life. I went to knock on the door and I walked in. It was dark. I heard TVs on and I flipped the light on, and that's about as far as I can go on that one.
Vilardi says her family has been kept out of the loop during the investigation, while investigators do everything they can to solve the crime.
And I understand, there again, they've got a job to do, but sometimes as family members, we want answers. And we just want to know what's going on.
And before we continue, let me talk to you for a second about Raycon, who are sponsoring this whole video. Guess what? It's back to school season for some people, and you know what? The prospect of like getting back and hitting the books didn't exactly, excite me. But I did enjoy the excuse to do some shopping. You know, it's a must-have for when you're studying, reading, listening to lectures. A hell of a good pair of earbuds to keep you going, which is exactly what you got with Raycon. To help with my studying, which is essentially like researching for these videos, it's the same as writing a college paper, Raycon sent me a pair of their everyday earbuds, and holy moly, they are awesome. They're noise cancelling, so I can't hear anything. They also just released them in some brand new colors with some badass cases too. There we go. You know, there's already a lot of features which I'm already a fan of. You get 32 hours of battery life. 10 minutes charge gives you 90 minutes of battery. We know all this, come on. But what about the new stuff Raycon just introduced with their earbuds? Raycon just released brand new features including active ergonomic design, multi-point connectivity, which lets you pair with 2 devices at once, and active noise cancellation. I am legit using the pair that Raycon sent me to edit the video you are watching, but I also use it for listening to music, podcasts, say that chapter podcast. Whatever I'm doing, I'll have them in. And 100. Boy, am I glad I had my Raycon everyday earbuds in for the past few miles. I got small ear holes, that's the right word, and no earaches. But guess what? If you are an elephant, Raycons are super customizable. They send you everything you need to have the best listening experience possible. Plus, they just look good, which makes me look uglier by comparison, to be frank. Thanks. They don't outsource their design and development. It's all in-house with their own team to make the highest quality earbuds. And that's not all. Guess what else you get with Raycon? Free shipping domestically, free and easy returns, but with over 50,000 5-star reviews, you ain't gonna be thinking about returns. So you know what? Why don't you get your own pair of Raycons today for yourself or whoever you know is heading back to school? And you know what? Tell them that chapter sent you. Click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/chapter to get 20 to 40% off your Raycon purchase. Thank you so much to Raycon for supporting that chapter. Check them out. Supporting them helps support us here. Once again, go to buyraycon.com/chapter for 20 to 40% off site-wide on your Raycon order, and listen good. Now, how about you listen up? Let's get back to it. So, someone had come into the house, and, the investigators were looking around. There was no signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no broken windows, or anything like that. Mike had no defense wounds on him at all. The others did have defensive wounds on him, but Mike didn't, so therefore it must have been a surprise attack, and he was likely attacked first. He was likely attacked first with 6 stab wounds to his neck, so whoever... They didn't need to break in their way into the door, and they were able to get close enough to him to stab him 6 times. Maybe then the others had been in the room, or they came to see what the disturbance was, and the attack just went on and on and on. The 2 older ladies wouldn't have been able to get away. Then maybe Cathy came, she saw what was happening, she tried to run away, she tried to hide in the bedroom, but the attacker or attackers followed her in. Neither of the murder weapons, the knife or the gun, was found at the scene. The knife was believed to be like a military style knife, with a hilt on it, because some of the stab wounds had bruising in the shape of the hilt. That's how forceful the knife had been used. The gun, they could tell, was a .38 caliber revolver, but interestingly enough, they found a holster for a .38 caliber revolver in Cathy's bedroom, where she had died. So maybe the attack had happened, Cathy had ran to try and get the gun to defend herself, the killers followed her in, they were able to get the gun off her, they shot her, then Cathy was stabbed to death. Then maybe the killer went around with this gun, shooting everybody else, the already dead people. Now, although Mike worked for the Department of Transportation, he did buy and sell gold and other valuables. Collector's coins, collector's weapons, collector's rifles and handguns, that kind of thing. So a robbery was the most likely motive. Well, the robbery and their lives. The murders were far too horrific to have been unplanned. Mike also stored thousands and thousands of dollars in the home. He didn't like having money in the bank. Mike and Cathy, they didn't trust the bank. Hey, listen, banks can collapse and lose all your money. Seen that movie before. And it did appear like a safe had been missing from the home. The police found like a shelf that was crooked, as if there had been, something heavy on it, like a safe. He usually would have kept somewhere between 60 and 80 grand in bills in the home. Did the police find it? You bet their ass they did not. Now, Mike had previously been through a difficult period in his life. I believe he had some substance, alcohol issues, but he was said to be a positive person who worked hard and loved his family. Mike had actually stopped, though, conducting transactions of gold because, guess what? He was afraid for his safety, and Cathy was afraid for her safety because, dealing with a cash business, it can sometimes go sour. Now, they never actually did those transactions, though, out of their own home. So, some kind of unruly customer, they would often sell things on eBay and on Facebook, but it's unlikely, they would have known where they lived. But I mean, hey, listen, anybody can find out where you live, am I right? And then, of course, if they did, one of the reasons you want to keep your money and your valuables in the bank is because it's very unlikely somebody's going to be able to break into a bank, but they can sure as shit break into your home. With all of this, it must have been someone they knew who did this violently, was able to get in, attacked them before they were able to defend themselves, and then knew where the money in the safe was.
If you were talking directly to the person, do you want to look in the camera and just say exactly what you would say to that person?
I can't say that on TV. I'm just going to be honest, I can't say that on TV.
So the police spread out like a spider web from there. First, of course, going across to the Vilardi trailer that was just out back, where Ross and Amy lived. See, one thing did strike the investigators as odd. On the table inside the murder scene were toys, kids' toys. And usually, if you're grandparents and you're looking after kids a while, you'd probably have them in a box and just put them away when the kids aren't here. So the fact that the toys were out was either were the kids just here, or were they preparing for the kids? Had they been planning on spending a great Halloween night together? And instead, other kind of monsters came in. Amy and Ross, as I said, they lived only 50 yards away, and they ran their own pet grooming business, Styles for Miles. Amy was always described as the wild child of the Scott family. She was the only daughter of Cathy. Ross was former military, a decorated US Marine who had even received specialized training. He was one of those Marines who guarded embassies. The American embassy he had been stationed at? The one in Dublin, of course. That's him outside it there. Amy and Ross had, if you can believe it, married only 1 week before the murders on the 24th of October, but you know, Amy had 2 kids from a previous relationship. This wasn't her first rodeo. And Amy was for sure as shit the decision maker in this relationship. She wore the pants, that's for sure. It seems like everybody would say, you know, Ross was kind of just like, he would do whatever she said. But everybody liked Ross, he happy out. A search of the Vilardis swiftly followed, and in the home, that trailer just sit back, the police found something they weren't exactly expecting to find. $60,000 to $70,000 in bills, cash bills. Weird, that's weird. Or Micah's was that money, what's it doing here? And one thing that the police also found interesting is that speaking to other family members and people who knew them, family, friends, Amy and Ross were experiencing money troubles. Really money, like apparently dog groom business, SHITE, that's how good it was going. It wasn't taking off like they had hoped, and their cars were being repossessed. The store they rented for their business was on their ass about rent. So pretty unusual finding that much money in the home of people who were allegedly broke. They also found an image of Mike's money. See, Mike had taken a picture of his dollar bills, sent it on Facebook to a colleague at work. Sure, you're gonna buy something off them, here's proof of how much money I have. So they were able to see that Mike's money matched the money that was found in the Vilardis in their home. And it wasn't just like it was the same amount of money, they could see the serial numbers were the same on the dollar bills. But of course, when Amy and Ross were asked, how do you have all this money? Life savings. Ross, he'd gotten like a big, huge settlement out of the military. It was on disability. And so he was like, you know, it's money from that. It's me and Amy been great little savers, you know, been saving up our little pennies in the piggy bank. That sounded like a lie, because even former employees of their dog grooming business would say, yeah, they never paid us full, like once. Ever. In fact, that's why we were former employees, because they weren't paying us. They also found a large stash of guns now, which is not that unusual. Ross was former military and he liked his guns, which is fine. And none of those were the murder weapon. Their DNA was in the double-wide trailer where the murders had happened, but of course it would be, it's a family, you know, they would see them all the time pretty regularly. But this was already enough that, I mean, almost from like Jump Street eyebrows were being raised as to who could commit such a horrific crime.
The stuff you see on TV, that has nothing, that you can't compare that. You can't compare that.
A week after a quadruple murder, a family is still searching for answers.
We used to have family dinners right here.
For Amy Vilardi,
it's just been a blur.
They say they never heard any gunshots or anything out of the ordinary from their house just around the corner.
There would be in total 6 search warrants executed on the Vilardis' home and a storage unit they owned, searching it from top to bottom. See, Amy and Ross did not get on well with the older folks at all, and it all stemmed from an incident maybe 4 or 5 months before all of this. It was the 4th of July, and Mike and Cathy had been taking the kids, their grandchildren, to like a church function for like some kind of celebration on the 4th of July. And when they got back to the house, they found Amy and Ross and some of their friends completely hammered drunk, like way out of it. And so Mike and Cathy, they were like, okay, we'll take the kids, you can keep getting shit-faced, and that just set off Amy, like you wouldn't believe, like a light bulb. This led to a huge fight which just kept escalating and then some more.
Right, here we go. Another fun-filled day with a narcissistic family. Him and that old woman every time.
For example, after this, Amy forbade her kids from seeing either their grandparents or their great-grandmothers, which was completely heartbreaking, you know, because that was like all they lived for, you know, that kind of way. Like Mike would come over hat in hand, just apologizing, begging to be able to see, you know, begging for his own sake and the other one's sake to be able to see, and Amy would just give him the bird. For example, he texted her this: "Your mother and I want to apologize. No favors asked or requests. We have 2 elderly people suffering from this. They have done nothing wrong. This has been very tough on all involved. We all make mistakes. It's best to try and learn from them. Please take into consideration the elderly. Our prayers continue for you all. Thanks for your time." Obviously like a very nice message, like kind of almost like too nice message, but clearly begging to be able to see the grandchildren. She eventually relented, sort of. See, again, like Cathy and Mike pretty much raised Amy's kids. Amy was off doing like whatever she was doing. while Mike and Cathy were there taking him to school, taking him to church, taking him to whatever, changing diapers, doing all of this sort of stuff. Amy was described by family as a spoiled, narcissistic, vindictive witch. Okay, she wasn't actually literally described by that, I'm paraphrasing here. But her own kids were like the workhorse in her arsenal against her parents. An argument. Get the kids out. She needed money. Kids?
Well, I can't sit there and just let you be alone with my children right now. Well, what would I do to it? I mean, emotional damage? Yes,
this would lead to fights, which sometimes escalated to physical, literal fights on, like, in the home.
I don't know what Cathy does. Feathers?
Yeah, that's right, Gabby. I know that.
Yeah, I'll show you stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
One of the things it's also believed that was like a burning pit of rage for Amy was that, well, Amy's father, Cathy's first husband, he'd been like a mechanic, and a car he'd been working on had crushed him in the shop. So he'd been rushed to hospital, but it was not good at all, and it really didn't look like he was gonna make it. Cathy was the one who had to switch off the life support for him. Which, you know, the whole situation is incredibly tragic, but that seems to be one thing Amy just never forgot. Amy never forgot that, and she would hold that against her mother. I guess Amy believed it was premature. You killed my dad, essentially. And that probably was just like a bitterness that Amy could just never shake. Didn't forgive it, didn't forget it. And Amy would regularly take to the internet, if you can believe it. Passive-aggressive, and also then just aggressive. But of course, you know, when it came to the murder investigation, both Amy and Ross were extremely cooperative. Though, of course, you have the means, the motive, and the opportunity, and then Ross, kind of like former specialized Marine with special training, would probably be pretty good with a knife and kind of know where to stick it in you to, you know, end you.
Investigators say the killer slashed their throats and shot them dead, and the culprit is still on the loose.
We've followed through with every lead that has come in. We still don't have any witnesses or anyone to confess.
Investigators are telling us they want anyone with information to call the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. You can also report any tips anonymously through Crime Stoppers.
One of the only clues as to the perpetrator was a shoe imprint, an Asics sneaker. Days would become weeks, followed by months and years as the case went cold. Amy and Ross, they chucked out all the shit that was in the house and they moved into this big old house. You know, Amy would be there, blood-soaked carpet. Out she get. She moved herself in there. They did a big remodeling job of this home, and so it was their brand new shampoo home. Listen, all's well that ends well for them. They later sold that home, though. I think they're probably quite familiar with lawsuits because they ended up getting sued for a lot of money when they took the $10,000 deposit but never handed over the deed. So that didn't end well for them, and they moved to a home in West Columbia, South Carolina. They then opened a new mobile, take it to you, a dog grooming business. And if you're, you know, under suspicion, a good way is to ingratiate yourself with the local law for any folks out there who might be up to no good. So they, of course, offered complimentary canine servicing in the local KC Police Department. They would plea again and again for the real killer to please come forward. We need to know. 7 months later on Facebook, a big piece of my heart lives in heaven, and she is my mom. It's really interesting from a psychological perspective to see Amy and Ross do these pleas on TV, to post these things. I mean, nothing was proven. You know, that she or Ross killed the 4 people in an extremely horrifying, nightmarish, brutal attack. But, you know, the psychology of just if they did do it, you know, appearing on TV again and again, doing these pleas and these crocodile tears and posting these things on Facebook. It's pretty wild. You would talk about this a lot. Of course, there was lots of rumors in the town and online about, you know, what was going on. But her Facebook posts are pretty funny. Because, of course, hey, she, as a victim of crime herself, she would also, you know, be on the lookout. Man, 53, beaten to death. Eyebrows raised, not far from my house. Then goes on and talks about people judging her, and the final comment, this is why nothing gets figured out about the murders, because everyone is too worried about me. But all the while, as years and years passed, the investigations into the murders, they continued. See, digging into the Vilardi's dog grooming business, well, it wasn't quite the success they had hoped for. As I said, the year of the murders, they had made less than $30,000. But in the previous year, 2014, they had bought a new truck, new car, two motorbikes, Harleys, if you can believe it. And then 1 month before the murders, Ross texted Amy saying, please stop spending money. We have $40 left in our account. Another example that came up repeatedly was that they owed somebody $8,000, so they gave them a check and said, don't cash that check until November 2nd. Then what happens November 2nd? Ross shows up with $8,000 in cash. Amazing. His life savings finally came true, and his in-laws' family were all murdered on the same day. 6 months after the quadruple murder, Amy and Ross actually sued the Anderson County Sheriff's Department for the return of property seized during those searches of their place. They, of course, had taken the money that matched the serial numbers, you know, from Mike's home in the picture, because, well, that's obviously his money. They'd also taken Ross's guns, but Amy and Ross were arguing that that's just money. That's our money. It's our life savings. It's not of sufficient evidentiary value, is the word they used. Their lawyers used. This, however, then led to an even bigger legal battle with family of the deceased. See, what's really interesting here, and what was dug up, is that Violet, Cathy's mom, Amy's grandmom, she'd come into a lot of money when in 1985 her husband had passed away. Violet, getting old, her health deteriorating, had moved in with Cathy, and, you know, Cathy looking after her all the time. Eventually, Violet gave her power of attorney to handle all of her affairs and put them in order. Cathy then made the unusual decision of withdrawing about $100,000 from Violet's account, unbeknownst to her own siblings, of course, who also would have, you know, been due to inherit this money. Cathy withdrew that money and placed it in checking accounts and investment accounts in her own name. So, well, that's kind of not on. And this is all completely separate to Mike's money. And Cathy, it seems, made the hugely terrible mistake of telling Amy this. So with Cathy's death, that would have been a lot of money to get, and not counting the cash that Mike had in his home. However, this then led to a lawsuit in 2018 when Cathy's brothers, I mean, that's essentially their inheritance money that Cathy had kind of stolen from her own mother, and then Amy was trying to get her claws onto it. But the judge sided with the family, saying that Cathy had, quote, breached her fiduciary duty by moving her mom's money into her own account. So as you can imagine, Amy was not happy about that.
Today marks 1 year since 4 people were found dead at an upstate home. Investigators say the killer is still out there, but there are some new developments.
It's now been 3 years since the 4 brutal murders of the Scott and Taylor families in Pendleton.
7 years since this unimaginable crime in Pendleton.
This case was never out of the news for long, and as you can imagine, never far from anyone's minds. But it was a tough nut they couldn't crack. It wasn't until a new detective came in and they started all over once again. Let's go back and begin at the very, very beginning. Time, you know, can act as a window cleaner. Okay, it's not my best analogy. Their alibi was that they had been in the weekend pretty much the entire time, but they hadn't seen anything. Amy and Ross, they hadn't seen anything. They hadn't heard any gunshots, nothing. Then only discovering the scene on the Monday morning when they hadn't seen him in a couple of days and they wanted to see the dogs. And their phones also placed them there at that time. A text Amy sent to Ross at 8:30 p.m. read, 10 more minutes, lol. Everyone is up now and talking, ha 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 ha. Take my car and grab a 6-pack. Which the police then began to think, well, that likely means maybe she wasn't at home. How would she know everybody is up now? Maybe she was in the trailer with the rest of them. Maybe trying to talk to them, distract them, getting ready to kill them. See, one of the reasons they took it slow was that all of the evidence was circumstantial, and time can make alibis wither and die on the vine. See, at the time of the murders, right, Ross said he didn't go and collect his kids till the Sunday morning, which would have been the day after the murders, but the scene hadn't been discovered yet. But he would then change his story years later and say, oh no, he had actually been there on a Saturday collecting his kids. Which disagreed with what he had originally said and what his phone said. Police found footage of that beer run Ross had done the night of. And in the footage, guess what? This former Marine with specialized training was wearing red Asics, specifically an Asics Gel Speedstar 5. So that seems to be exactly this type of shoe print that was found in the home. Now, I hear you're barking, big dog. Of course his shoe prints would be found in the home. It was his in-laws. He'd be there all the time. Well, though, the shoe prints, specifically a couple of the shoe prints, were found on top of blood droplets. So therefore, the shoe prints must have happened after the blood was spilled. And Mike said he never went into the house when Amy first discovered it. He never went in, waited for the police. And those shoes, of course, they were never found. Of course they were never found during a search of the Vilardis. In fact, when Mike was asked, he was like, what happened to them? Couldn't tell you.
Do you remember owning a red pair of shoes? Red pair of shoes? Asic Speedstar shoes.
Don't recall.
These Asics Speed Store shoes.
Yeah, okay, I remember those shoes.
What happened to the shoes?
That's a good question because I have no idea.
This is from crime scene photos, and these are confirmed to be Asics Speed Store shoes.
Okay.
Inside, and they have blood droplets on them. And interestingly enough, you're at the Quick Trip wearing those shoes the night of the murders.
Okay.
So if you never went in the house, I'm just interested to know how they ended up in the house.
I have no idea how those shoes would have had any kind of blood on them. I mean, obviously I was wearing them at a Quick Trip on the 31st.
Well, and they never found the clothes either that you were wearing.
That hoodie?
Mm-hmm.
I think here.
The fact that your shoes are inside of the house in blood, that's a big problem.
Again, I don't know where the shoes are at the moment, and I don't remember whatever happened to those particular shoes. If something were to have happened that I had done, it would be stupid for me to wear them into the house and then wear them after that, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They were never found. So it's almost like you got rid of them.
Amy, too, when she was later interviewed, would downplay the fights she had.
So we're here to see if there's anything that you can help us with the case.
You know, you get pretty irritated about lies.
I understand.
And stuff going around.
I understand.
Everything else and how that affects your children.
We're trying to do right by your mother,
right?
Your grandmother, and then obviously Mr. Scott and his mom. What do you remember? What can you help us with? Where should we look?
Yeah, me and my therapist talk about that a lot. Obviously, you got to know finding dead people doesn't really leave you in the right state of mind. Can do things to you. I drug myself like crazy for about a couple of years there, and I've chosen to step away, and I've got to be healthy, and I've got kids, and I've got a life to live, and if somebody else dropped the ball on it, it's not on me anymore.
And now she was also saying that she too went to Ross's parents on Friday night. They were both now telling completely different stories and changing their alibis about where they'd been that night. Now again though, I have to say, like, this is purely circumstantial, and these interviews were done so many years later. You know, well, close to 8 years later. I mean, it can be very easy to just get dates wrong when you're talking about something that happened so long ago. But then again, it's something pretty important in your life and probably pretty impactful. You probably also would have gone through it numerous times in your own head and when telling the police these stories, so you might have a pretty good idea of what you did. Perhaps the reason the toys were out in the home was that Amy said, "Hey, I'm bringing them over. Get the toys ready. I know we've been on tough terms lately. I haven't been letting you see the kids, but you know what? It's Halloween. Bring them over." She went over. She was talking with her parents, with her grandmothers, yapping away this and that. She texted Ross, "Everybody's up now. Come on over in 10 minutes time." Amy was essentially there as a distraction, while Ross then came in with a military-issued knife and attacked Mike first, who would have been, the most strongest person there, stabbing him 6 times in the neck. Then, when the 2 older ladies tried to run, well, Amy was there just blocking their way. Amy was holding them and just blocking them, while Ross then quickly made short work of the 2 older ladies, and then Cathy tried to run, tried to get the gun out. Amy went in, maybe fought over the gun. She got the gun off her, she shot Cathy, Ross came up, he stabbed her, and then Amy went and shot everybody else. The whole scene wasn't reported to police till like over 36 hours later. This happened on the Saturday night. It was like Monday afternoon when the police arrived, so that gives you quite a lot of time to clean up any evidence, get rid of anything from the scene, do whatever to make it seem like, you didn't do it. But of course, that was only a theory.
Well, only on Fox here at 6 o'clock, the Anderson County Sheriff is naming 2 persons of interest in an unsolved quadruple homicide in Pendleton. The killings dominated news coverage across the upstate in 2015. And now, almost 8 years later, the sheriff says this couple, Amy and Ross Vilardi, are persons of interest.
It was March 2023 that police finally named Amy and Ross publicly as persons of interest, though unpublicly they had been for the previous 8 years. This was likely to try and persuade them, pressure them, maybe elicit a confession? It didn't work. In fact, it wouldn't be until December that things would finally happen.
The Vilardis, of course, are related to the victims. Specifically, Amy Vilardi is the daughter of victim Cathy Scott, and also granddaughter to Violet Taylor. So Ross is Amy's husband, and again, together we have arrested them just a little bit ago at their residence in Columbia, South Carolina.
December 2023, over 8 years after the murder, both Amy and Ross Moore Vilardi were charged with the quadruple homicide. They had been publicly named persons of interest 9 months before, and now it was time for the bracelets. They both applied for bond twice, denied twice. It's believed they would have had enough money to run. Family members pleaded for them not to be given bond, and it worked.
Just to be clear, I think it is the state's belief that Miss Vilardi is the mastermind of this situation. The one person who stood to truly benefit from their death was Amy Vilardi. She quickly cleaned up the residence where the murders took place, where the 4 bodies had been for well over 24 hours.
And get this, in February 2024, 2 shanks were found in Amy's cell. And Amy was allegedly overheard to have said, "I'm getting out of here, one way or another." Now, of course, though, Amy's defense would say, no, those shanks were from another, so there was like multiple prisoners in the cell. Wasn't hers.
Comment that is in the report, if she said, "I'm getting out of here one way or the other," if she did say that, that doesn't imply that she's a danger to other people, it implies she's a danger to herself.
The defense would also say Amy and Ross had 8 years to flee the country. After, if they committed this, they had so much time to move to a country where, they had no extradition. Although, it's probably also quite likely that maybe Amy and Ross just never assumed they were going to get caught. They hadn't been caught for 8 years. Maybe they weren't going to get caught now. Why would you leave if you're not going to get caught? They loved it. They loved South Carolina. They loved America. Why would they want to move away from family and friends? Of course they felt like, I guess, at this point, they felt like they had no reason to leave. 8 years is a long time.
What the state of South Carolina has done after 8 years is come up with a theory. They've come up with a theory in which they intend on utilizing in front of a jury, I'm assuming, or in front of your honor. This is our theory of what happened on the case. The problem with theories and the problem with themes is they have to be based with evidence. It's taken 8 years to bring this case. The reason it's taken 8 years is because they've looked for evidence and it's not there.
For 8 years, they were able to move where they wanted. They could visit where they wanted, travel where they wanted, run if they wanted, move to a country that doesn't have extradition if they wanted, but they didn't. They stayed here. In fact, the Sheriff's Department was at the Vilardi's house on December the 11th, trying to get Ross Vilardi to turn on Amy Vilardi, trying to elicit a confession. You would think that if they had enough evidence that they would not be needing to try to elicit this confession.
Since February 2024, however, there have been no updates, I'm sorry to say, in this case. Innocent until proven guilty and all of that, but if the prosecution is correct and Amy and not Ross Moore, they did do it, well, probably honestly, it's one of the most gruesome crimes and most, reading the descriptions, it's very horrific. Well, that would definitely make Amy one of the most narcissistic, manipulative, vindictive, and I think evil people I've covered on that chapter. And of course, you know that once this gets to trial, if it gets to trial, if and when it gets to trial, so much more will be coming about what really happened that day. And who knows what the police haven't released. I wonder what the police interviews will be like. But they may have brutally murdered 4 really nice, caring people who just wanted to help them. Especially the 2 old ladies, that's killer. Who gave them a home. Gave them a trailer in the back of their land. Gave them money all the time. And in turn, they suffered a pretty horrific fate. This is definitely one of the scariest stories of the year that happened on one of the scariest nights of the year. Thank you so much for watching. It really means the absolute world to me that you're here. Can't thank you enough. As always, if you're looking for more of That Chapter, please check out the That Chapter Patreon, where for $2 a month, there's a playlist of exclusive old videos there, and you get early access, ad-free, sponsor-free, all that stuff. Videos are there, and also, guess what? You can check out the That Chapter podcast, which releases a brand new episode every Monday morning. We're talking, what are we talking about lately? The Greenbrier ghosts, right? We're talking about the Ariel School UFO. We're talking about Terry Thompson and the Zanesville Massacre. We're talking about the Brabant Killers coming up very, very soon. All sorts of stuff. And of course, your listeners' stories where people send in their scariest stories of stuff that happened to them. So go check it out. But until the next old video, which will be up now when it's up, please take care of each other and please take care of yourselves. Because I love you. Mike out.